If you worked in the 1800s, then you would likely be woken up each morning by a man banging on your bedroom window with a big stick. Because alarm clocks hadn't been invented yet, people had to rely on knocker-uppers to make sure people got to work on time. However, now we have alarm clocks and phones, the noble profession of knocker-upper has faded into obscurity, having been replaced by a piece of technology. Over the years, as technology has evolved, many professions have become irrelevant. And if we look to the future, it looks like many of the jobs we see people doing today will soon become a thing of the past. Autonomous vehicles look set to change the haulage and transport industries. Increased automation in factories reduces the need for human labour. You can even buy a freshly cooked pizza from a vending machine these days. But I'm safe, right? I mean, I went to university. There's no way that technology can replace me. So, a few weeks ago, I came across ChatGPT, and it is outstanding. I used the system to write me a script for the Kosh video we published a few weeks ago, and although it wasn't perfect, it eliminated a significant amount of the planning and writing of the video, bringing the production time of the video from 11 hours to just 6, which is great because I hate Kosh, and the less time I have to spend on it, the better. However, as I've thought more about ChatGPT and the similar upcoming systems like Google's Bard, I am increasingly concerned about my job. I mean, a lot of what we do is producing policies and documents for clients. If there's an app that can do all this, will my business be relevant, or is iSafe destined to become just another knocker-upper? So in this video, I'm going to put myself out of a job by reviewing ChatGPT's work and seeing if it can write some usable health and safety documentation. If it's crap, great, I'm safe and will remain in gainful employment. And if it's good, I'll be heading to the job centre this afternoon. Before we get started, can you hit the subscribe button, because YouTube may end up being my only source of income by the end of this video. Okay, so first up, one that all health and safety people will have to do at some point in their career, writing an health and safety policy. Okay, so I really like that. It's started from a point of, this is generic. It says, here's basic health and safety policy that can act as a starting point for your organisation. So for me, that's really important. Whatever this produces is going to be generic. It's not going to have things like company names. It's not going to have things that'll talk about your organisational structure within that, or specific roles, responsibilities and arrangements that you'd expect to see in an health and safety policy. What it'll act as is a template for that, and hopefully give you some things to consider within the finished product that you can look at. Okay, so it's just finished. So health and safety policy, purpose, so this is the scope, what the policy is trying to achieve. The health and safety policy sets out our commitment for ensuring the health, safety and well-being. Very good. The next thing is the responsibilities. Management is responsible for ensuring that, okay, I would expect there to be a little bit more in relation to the responsibilities. I would expect it to refer to a specific person, like the managing director or the CEO or the top person within the organisation, general generic terms that says they've got overarching responsibility for those factors. Yeah, it's got something about all employees though. Generally, I break it down a bit further and have the director, managing director at the top, the board, management, supervisors, and then all workers. So there are a few arrangements in there as well. This is not necessarily a health and safety policy. This is what we call a health and safety policy statement. It's basically the executive summary of what a health and safety policy might look like. So it gives you a general overview. This is the sort of thing that you stick on a notice board or on a site to show your management commitment and to show that there is a policy in place, and give you the headlines of what's included in that policy. So when I was saying a minute ago about responsibilities, maybe that'd be in the much larger health and safety policy manual document. As a policy manual, as a policy statement, It's not bad. It's got somewhere to sign it. It's got somewhere to date it. Stick your company name on it. Review it. It's not awful, but I wouldn't put that out. It wouldn't be good enough for me to hand to a client. So for that reason, it's a good start, but I'll give it a 5 out of 10, that one. Okay, so it's produced as a policy statement. Let's see if it can handle some of the arrangements that might be in that policy manual. So let's ask it to write as a policy on risk assessment. Again, here's the generic policy. It's setting out a scope, very good. It's telling you what it's trying to achieve. By that, it's telling you who's responsible for maintaining and implementing this policy, and then it's going into some arrangements. So far so good. It's looking at the steps, the 5 steps of risk assessment. If you've seen our channel before, you'll know that at the minute we're posting a series of videos on how to complete a good risk assessment. So the 5 steps essentially: identification of risk, assess the risk, implement controls, record, review, etc. It's highlighted them, which is great. So this is a policy that would be in accordance with the Management of Health and Safety at Work Act, Management of Health and Safety at Work regulations, and would Schedule 2 of that, which outlines the principles of prevention. So that's good. Risk control measures: we will implement appropriate risk control to eliminate. That is a great thing to put in there. I mean, it's a legally required thing under the management regs, as I've just mentioned, and the principles of prevention, or reduce the risk to an acceptable level. Communication: are they going to communicate it? Review and update. For me, that's pretty damn good. It needs a bit of beefing out, it needs a bit of expanding on, just like the general health and safety policies. I expect it to be referring to specific documentation. I'd like it to break down those roles and responsibilities a bit more. I'd like it to give a bit more information on the arrangements for doing it. But overall, with a bit of beefing out and a bit of fleshing out, that is a good start for 6 for a risk assessment policy. So a little bit worried now, because I'm going to have to give that an 8 out of 10. Okay, so let's ask it for some operational documentation. One thing that's required under the Work at Height regulations, and many other things, but specifically Work at Height regulations, is to have a rescue plan. So I think it'd be a good one if we ask it to write us a rescue plan for a cherry picker. Here we go. Sure. Here's a sample rescue plan. Okay, so in this procedures section, it was so far so good, but the operator of the cherry picker should immediately stop the machine and stabilise it. What if they can't? I mean, these rescue plans have got to take into account if somebody has an heart attack or passes out in that cherry picker. So in that case, how are they going to stop that machine? It doesn't really make sense. Obviously, if they can do that, they can stabilise it and lower the basket to ground level. It's not really an emergency. What I'd expect this to be talking about is what happens if the cherry picker gets stuck or they are unable to operate that from the basket. So this is talking about the rescue team actually getting into the basket with these people, which isn't the first port of call for me. I would expect it to start by talking about lowering the basket from ground level. The rescue team should be familiar with the controls and the operation of the machine, and all cherry pickers have the ability to lower the basket from ground level. beyond that, I'd talk about manual lowering, as in disabling the hydraulics and bringing it safely down. Where neither of those are possible, let's say there's an operative in the steelwork of a mute and it'd be dangerous to move that, so you'd have to get up there. I'd talk about basket to basket rescue, which I suppose, it doesn't actually say how you're going to get up there. I'm glad it don't talk about ladders or anything like that, and I'm also glad that it doesn't talk about the emergency services, because one thing about a rescue plan that you're not allowed to do is rely on the emergency services for getting somebody out of a mute basket or from height. So yeah, it's a bit thin. And where the other ones kind of gave you a reasonably good template and a good starting point, I don't think that this one quite does that. I think it might lead somebody down a garden path of, we need to get into the basket, where there's significantly better control measures before we get to that point. I like that the next section talks about training and drills. A lot of rescue plans that we see don't actually mention training in that rescue plan. It's basically given to them as a piece of paper and they're asked to sign it, and particularly drills. So they actually get to practice this. We've done this with a few clients to sort of hammer this point home, that people need to be able to know how to work the controls from a ground level. So I like that that's in there. Obviously needs to be expanded on, and what those training and drills might look like, but not so bad on that. Review and update, yeah, absolutely fine. A lot of this isn't bad, however, the procedures section, which is the most important section of this document, lets it down in my opinion, and as I say, might lead somebody down a dangerous route when they're actually putting together the rescue plan, and leads them to not look at better control measures. So for that, I'd probably give it a 2 out of 10. Don't use this for this. Okay, so finally, let's see if we can get it to put us together a check sheet. Check sheets are super useful for a number of things in health and safety. Pre-use checks for plant, point of work, risk assessments, all that kind of thing. I doubt that it'll actually be able to put it into a format, but let's ask it to put us together a pre-use check for a fork truck and see what the content is there. This is actually pretty good, I'm not going to lie. I'm watching it write it, and I think about our forklift check sheets that we produce, and other than it being in a weird format where it's not really a checklist, all these things could be copied out, put into a grid and made into a checklist quite easily. It even mentions the horn, which is an often missed thing. So one thing I've noticed through all of these documents that it's produced, it's not referring to any sort of legislation. In the UK, we're legally required to ensure that any sort of piece of lifting equipment has a thorough examination, which meets the requirements of the lifting operations, lifting equipment regulations, or LOLA. I would expect part of the pre-use check to make sure that a thorough examination on that piece of plant has been completed in 12 months under normal circumstances, or 6 months if it's going to be lifting people in a man basket or something like that. So that's obviously missing out there. I suspect ChatGPT is pretty American. It's also suspect if I typed UK at the end of all these questions where I've asked it to develop me something, it would be able to do that, and it would include the requirements of LOLA. Apart from that, it's pretty. For me, it ticks all the boxes. I genuinely think that this is, other than the format, there's not, which it's not designed to do that yet. I'm sure it will be soon. there's not many holes I can pick in that off the top of my head. So I'm happy that it checks everything. I'd be relatively happy with the checks on there. As I say, I'm doing all this off the cuff, so if I've missed anything, feel free to shout at me in the comments. But for me, that actually looks pretty decent. 8 out of 10? 9 out of 10? Yeah, 9 out of 10. Okay, so we could go on, but the theme here is that it's good, but not quite good enough. Also, at the start of this video, I might have slightly embellished the importance of writing documentation to iSafe. Don't get me wrong, it's a big chunk of work, but for us, the important part is making sure people are working to the policies and processes and that they're working to keep people safe at work. Ultimately, words on a page don't keep people safe, and it's the implementation of these words and the actions they inspire that will stop accidents and legal issues for your business. That's why iSafe provide vastly more face-to-face services such as auditing, coaching and mentoring as part of our competent person service than just providing documentation. Take a look at our services in the link below, because I feel like it'll be a while before the AI overlords can do all of this stuff. This could actually be a good thing for the safety consultants, as it means spending a lot less time on the boring documentation stuff, leaving us more time for the face-to-face stuff that actually keeps people safe. Where this will affect our industry is with the bigger health and safety consultants. I spoke about these in our How Much Does a Health and Safety Consultant Cost video. If you want to catch that, I'll put a link up there. These businesses have a much bigger focus on the provision of documentation rather than the face-to-face support. To be honest, if these guys aren't looking at ChatGPT and similar software through a very worried lens and making adaptations to their business, I don't think they'll be around in a few years. At the end of the day, this software is here now, and even though it needs a bit of polishing, this will get better to the point where writing and reviewing documents can easily be done through an app. If you pick up a phone from 10 years ago, it's basically unusable by today's standards, and although ChatGPT's answers still need a little intervention from somebody who knows about health and safety, it won't be long before the answers and the documentation it produces are on par with the knowledge of an expert. The pace in which technology is emerging and accelerating means if businesses like iSafe and other consultancies don't adapt to this progression, we will become irrelevant. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's slightly different from the usual stuff, but if you like what you see, why not subscribe to our channel? Also, if you want to see me make similar videos like this, or you want me to review more of ChatGPT's answers to health and safety questions, leave me a comment below. But for now, thanks for watching and stay safe out there.